Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. So, if you watched my last recommendations video, I talked about a ton of books that I related to a little too much, and I'm sure a lot of you guys also did too, because if you're on BookTube, you were likely a reader, which chances are you're also introverted or you just are not big on social interactions because we like solitary hobbies. So in this video, I'm going to recommend a whole bunch of fiction books with characters that we can relate to. So this is going to be a lot of books that I'm going to cover a bunch of different genres in it that I have just really seen myself in the main character. A lot of these books are the first times that I've really related to the character on the page, as opposed to all of the crazy extroverted main characters that we see. You know that like main character energy that everybody's talking about where it's like all eyes on me? I don't want that. I don't want eyes on me whatsoever, but they might have a story to tell regardless. Because hello, we all exist. So, I'm going to start with what I'm assuming you guys are all going to expect to see on this list, so we're just going to get it out of the way early. Fangirl. I'm sure many of you guys have read this book, and this was one of the first books that you ever read that you really identified with Kath, the main character in this book. This is a YA cult classic at this point. It is about a girl and her sister, and they've been writing fan fiction their entire lives growing up, and they are about to go off to college, and her sister is an extrovert and is going to thrive in a social environment, and Kath is very worried about going to college because she's out of her comfort zone, she's going to be pushed into a lot of uncomfortable situations, and all she wants to do is sit in her room and write fan fiction. This is the first time I've ever identified with a character so hard, so I'm sure most of you guys have read this at this point, but I figured this is a good kickoff point because not only is it a very introverted main character, but she has a very specific nerdy hobby, which is an ongoing theme that I personally have related to, because hello, nerd here. A lot of very specific nerd fandoms are starting to come out in books, and it's wonderful to see. And in that same vein, I'm also going to recommend Eliza and Her Monsters. This is a very similar type of story where nerdy girl gets kind of pushed out of her comfort zone, but I personally think I like this one more than I liked Fangirl. I think I related a little too much to Eliza in this book, but this is a very similar type of story where she is also working on like fan art and nerd culture, and it's just wonderful, and this one is also YA. And before I jump ship from the YA market, another one that I want to recommend is Queens of Geek by Jen Wilde. This has a lot of really good representation in it, not just like geeky, nerdy fandom type stuff, but also like autism rep and sexuality, and there's a lot of really good stuff packed in this little tiny book. But this is basically about a group of friends who go to essentially a fictionalized Comic-Con type of situation, and that just speaks to me because Comic-Con nerdy conventions are generally the only places that us introverts still feel comfortable because you're surrounded by a lot of other people who are also equally as terrified of crowds as you are. Like, it's this weird balance where you're all socially awkward and it's okay because you're all together. Isn't that weird? So this really does focus on the concept of like being overstimulated in crowds, but like being really excited to be there and still thoroughly enjoying yourself, but needing to like go back to the hotel room and sit for a little bit and calm down, and then go back into the craziness that is a convention. So I highly recommend this, not just for like the introverted rep or the autism rep, but also just for like the nerd goodness that's in it. Ugh, it just speaks to me. Another thing that speaks to me, not necessarily in the introverted sense, but I have started to see that a lot of authors and a lot of publishers are starting to catch on to the fact that us readers are readers. Go figure. I don't know why it took that long for them to realize that a person who is reading a book will likely identify with a person who reads books in the book. Does that make sense? Because I don't know why that's a foreign concept that is just now being adapted into stories. So we're starting to see a lot of like bookish people as the main character, which is wonderful. I might make an entire separate video about like self-aware reader stuff. That's not what this video is going to be. But there are starting to be a lot of book reviewers and book blogging and booktubing and bookstagramming be in books. Like, publishers are starting to realize we're the ones reading. We want to see ourselves in those books. So the first one from way back when that finally started to introduce this concept is the Lex series by the queen herself, Jennifer L. Armentrout. Katie in this book is a book blogger. Like, she made the "my blog is better than your vlog" shirt famous. If you've ever seen people wearing that, it's from this. This is an alien paranormal romance YA series that is just, it's so good. It's so bad, but it's so good. It's such a, like, a wonderful, like, nod back to, like, the Twilight era of reading. I will revisit the series from time to time and just relive my old school PNR days, but Katie is one of the first characters that, like, you saw her reading books in between, like, big climactic scenes. We saw her reading, and I was just like, oh my god, it's me. And then she blogs about it, and we talk about, like, all of the specific, like, blog posts that all book blogs have. It was very nice to be seen in a book. And jumping into, like, adult romance version of that, Book Boyfriend by Claire Kingsley. This also follows a book reviewer, and also, if you're a reader, this will be included in that future video whenever I get around to making it, but if you are a reader, this is your fantasy. It's literally called Book Boyfriend. It's about a romance book reviewer who goes to, like, a book signing and ends up meeting this guy who is, like, perfect. He is a reader. He is, like, everything that you write your main characters to be in romance books. Turns out he is a romance author, so he knows how to play the game. Like, he knows what women are looking for, and it's, like, all of your reader fantasies in one, but this is another book where the main character is a book reviewer, and she is very aware of, like, the book world. So it was really cool to see that on page in a book. Go figure. Okay, I'm gonna jump into a couple, like, specific nerdy fandom goodness type things. One book that I'm going to recommend is Spoiler Alert by Olivia Dade. This is another adult romance that follows a girl who writes fan fiction. So this is kind of an adult version of Fangirl and Eliza and Her Monsters, but it really delves into the fan fiction world and how that affects the actors of the fan fictions that you're writing, like the shows that you're writing fan fiction of. This is a romance between a fan fiction writer going on a date with an actor of the show that she writes fan fiction for. So it's very self-aware, and I highly recommend it. So this one was really fun, not only for, like, the nerd culture side, but also seeing that nerdy person get pulled out into the real world and experience things, and vice versa. Like, the male lead got pulled into the fan fiction world. It was wonderful. It's wonderful. Getting away from the fan fiction world and getting into one that's very specific to me and just speaks to my nerdy little heart. If you happen to be a Ren Fair nerd, let me introduce you to the Well Met series. This is book 1, this is book 2, book 3 comes out this fall, I've already read it, and honestly, book 3, which is called Well Matched, is going to be the one that I'm going to recommend the most for this specific video, because these two books introduce the concept of going to a Renaissance fair and falling in love. They're all little adult romances that are just so fun, but going to the Ren Fair is it's similar to a Comic-Con experience. It's one of the few places where you get to, like, put on a costume and just act like a different person. And I think that really speaks to us socially anxious people, because you kind of get to, like, play make-believe as an adult, and it's allowed. And it's one of the few places that I feel super confident in a very social setting. And I think it's just because you can literally just turn yourself into a make-believe character. So this series speaks to that, but Well Matched specifically follows a character who isn't a part of the Ren Fair scene and gets introduced to it, and it's really nice to see her introverted, quiet perspective, not understanding why people do this, and thinking that it's, like, the worst thing ever, where you're put into, like, the spotlight. And then she starts to really understand, like, the magic of going to a Renaissance fair, where it's just full of nerdy people who are just having a good time and day drinking and wearing costumes. And it's just, these are very specific to me, but I really like them because that just speaks to, like, the nerdy part of me. I'm also going to recommend just Talia Hibbert as an author. I'm sticking in the adult romance genre for a while here, I'm sorry. But Talia Hibbert writes a lot of books that have very good autism representation in it, which kind of coincides a lot with what I'm discussing in this video. But her main characters are, like, take no prisoners, really strong, really smart women who are very self-aware of the fact that they have unique lifestyles and hobbies. Like, a girl like her, the main character of this, what's her name? Ruth, just speaks to my soul, because a lot of the scenes, like the meet cute scenes that she has with, like, the hero in this book, are her in her pajamas reading comic books. And I'm like, oh, it's me. That's me on page. So Talia Hibbert as an author, I'm gonna totally recommend. And okay, I'm gonna get out of the romance world. Another book that just does it for me. The Murderbot books by Martha Wells. These books. So Murderbot is this cyborg robot humanoid type of character who is basically hired security. It is a sci-fi series where crews can hire these murder bots to essentially come with them to be like a hired hand or hired security for the crew if they're doing something dangerous. These books are all told from Murderbot's perspective, and Murderbot wants nothing to do with these crews of people. He thinks that humans are so stupid and so overly emotional, overly reactive to things, and all that Murderbot wants to do is watch some soaps. That's it. Just wants to be left alone and wants to watch his stories or their stories. It's kind of a gender fluid character, which is also an interesting take. And it's just them being snarky and sarcastic and rolling their eyes at these humans and all of the things that they do as groups of humans when Murderbot just wants to be left alone and can't be bothered to help these stupid humans and their extroverted ways. Murderbot is just the best introverted character I've ever read, and they are all really short novellas. The whole series is very short up until I think book 5, and then it starts to go back and forth between like full-length novels and then little novellas. Highly, highly recommend this series if you are introverted because you will laugh through the whole thing. So those are some books that I'm gonna recommend if you are an introverted, nerdy, socially anxious person. These are books that all have characters that are like us in it. The main characters. Like, the main character does not have to have main character energy. They can be reserved, they can be quieter and softer spoken, but still have a full story and still have a full, healthy life to tell on the page. So, if you have more recommendations like this, I am always on the search. Specifically nerdy ones, like I could technically include like Ready Player One, Gamer Girl in Real Life. Like, there's a lot of like mangas out there that are also nerd culture. Anything nerdy, it just works for me. It just appeals to me as a reader. So those are my recommendations. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys in my next one.